Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to see you in this room. I guess if you're around here, it's because you have some interest in creating more value around your IP or your client's IP, and you're interested also in transmedia, which is a big buzzword. It's been floating around for quite some years and picking up again with some amazing adaptations in the past few years, thinking of Fallout recently and The Last of Us, and really demonstrating that there's a way to bring games to life in very new and fresh ways across different mediums. And so what I want to bring to the table today from the unique perspective that we have at Allison Smith Studio. So I'm Catherine, I'm business lead. I lead all gamified activations at Allison Smith Studio. We are a marketing agency that was, a few years ago a gaming company. So we are quite at this interesting intersection of really designing activations as if they were games. So we are pioneers in what we call alternate reality games. Who in the room is familiar with ARGs? Okay, got a few people, good. So alternate reality games, what we call ARG, which is something that we are pioneers in, we've been doing for more than a decade now. It's really this integration of gameplay into reality. It's really using the real world as a platform and really integrating narrative in reality so that communities of fans can come together and collaborate to unlock content, special announcement, and solve the mysteries together. And it's really an interesting way of innovating gameplay because it is really designing the world as a new dimensions in which you can play, in which you can really see reality in a new, fresh way and with new possibilities. So it's really about bringing to life IPs in the real world and really creating these dynamic ecosystem and utilizing transmedia strategies and storytelling in order to really create these multiplicities of touch points to tell different angles of the story of a game and bring people in a cohesive narrative. So as I mentioned, we were originally a gaming studio designing our own ARGs. The Black Watchman was the first permanent ARG that was put out in the world. We did a couple of seasons. It was a game about joining occult forces and fighting occult forces and joining an organization. And it was starting on Steam, but then you had to call phone centers to get some information. You had to navigate through websites. You had to solve different mysteries. And we had even live seasons. So at some point, we ran a Kickstarter. We got somebody that paid about $15,000 to be kidnapped. I don't think this is something that we would be able to do today, but we did get somebody to get in a van, all live streamed, and they had to open a briefcase and complete a quest alongside the community that was online and watching. So as we were creating these experiences, self-published, we caught the attention of big publishers who wanted to use these techniques to bring to life games and go-to-market strategy in non-traditional way. And about, I'd say 10 years ago, ARGs were a bigger thing in the market. And so we've done a few for No Man's Sky, for Paradox Interactive, and also more recently for brands that want to activate their brand IP in a very innovative way and get into gaming culture. Maybe some of you know about Waking Titan, which is one of our most famous ARG, which we did for No Man's Sky. For those who remember, that launch was quite awful. They had lots of bugs and the game was really not up to par, so fans were actually suing the company. And so they came to us and they said, we're fixing the game. Give us a year, entertain the community, flip the narrative and the energy on Reddit, make it positive. So that's what we did. So we took inspiration from the lore of the game that was quite invisible at the time, and we created a science fiction-based mission and quest, sending satellite messages. We sent tape cassettes to different streamers who had to decipher the codes to enter a portal and an array of different websites and fake companies that they had to hunt down. So we were able to sustain engagement and positivity in the community for about a year and a half until they were able to fix the game, launch the patch, and the campaign paid for itself in 24 hours. So in terms of return on investment, it's interesting to look at ARGs as very powerful ways to expand your community and create more awareness around assets in very new ways. In the case of the Tender ARG, which we did with Paradox Interactive for the announcement of Bloodlines 2, that's one of my favorite because it was basically creating this fake dating app that we launched, as if it was a regular app. But then people started feeling that something was weird about this app. And it was basically a Uber Eats for vampires. So you were actually interacting with people that wanted to eat you, and they were inspired by characters from the game that we brought to life through this app. And then we created the character of a journalist that was investigating the backstory of this fake company, all culminating at GDC during a live event that we created with 30 actors, interactive theater. For those of you who are fans of Sleep No More, that's a big inspiration for us as well. So really integrating the characters into the real world, all streaming that live, and really giving fans a chance to discover new angles of the Vampire the Masquerade franchise. And it culminated in the announcement that the game was in the works, hopefully coming out this year. And now, in the spirit of what is the future of ARGs, we are also bringing these ingredients into the space of brands like Red Bull, who really want to put the user and the player at the core of the activation. They activate a lot with athletes online, and so we create these streamer programs where, with an extension on Twitch, it's the fan that is the army. So it's all about creating this dynamic where the user is the core of, at the core of the experience, just like in games. So hear me today. What I want to help you do is a mindset shift. Maybe some of you here have their own studio or work with studios. You're not just a video game company. You're much more than that. I believe that you are entertainment companies. And if you look at the way that marketing has been evolving in the past decade, of course, entertainment marketing is a big thing. Of course, you're not all going to be capable of launching your own blockbuster movie in the next few days or years. Maybe there's the new Super Mario Bros. Movie in the room today. But I think my position today is really to help you understand the landscape of transmedia, the potential it brings to marketing, and how you can baby step into the world of transmedia to build deeper community and expand on your IP and bring a lot of value as you experiment. So, talking of baby steps, we also need to look at the North Star. And I want to talk a bit about Blizzard because I got the chance to see the VP of Story and Franchise Development at South by Southwest was sharing the internal structure of how they're actually building, well, transmedia and world building as part of their practice. So they have a dedicated team in-house. Of course, you know all about their animation, their really amazing cinematics, but they have that team that is really operating internally as the hub for expanding new ways for fans to engage with the story. And one element I want to point out here is the role of the archivist and the historian. So a few gaming companies, AAAs, have the privilege of having the budget to hire historians in-house. So a question for you today is, who could be that historian in your organization that knows about the story inside out and can help you and guide you extend it so it keeps its coherence? So maybe that's an interesting starting point, thinking about new kind of hats that your team can put on to think in expanding the world that you are creating, because it's not just games that you're doing, it's world building. I think what's the most compelling about transmedia is the fact that, like games, you're putting the user at the core of the story and they're influencing the outcome. And transmedia is really all about turning fans into explorers. It's a beautiful mindset where you get people to really participate actively in understanding all the different entry points and the different fragments of the story to build a full picture. So it's not just about having a fan that's looking at a trailer, it's having somebody that's actually actively engaging and exploring and being a big part of the journey of launching, let's say, a sequel or an update or a DLC. So it's really, and I love this quote from a psychologist who actually worked on the psychology behind transmedia. And when people actively participate either through content creation or following a trail of across assets, they become stakeholders in the transmedia experience. So how can you turn your players into stakeholders that will bring your IP to the next frontier? That brings a lot of value, and it has a lot of business value. If you look at it from data points of organizations that are really thinking from an omnichannel perspective, and that's maybe more of a marketing term and business term here, but I apply it also to transmedia in a way because it's really about utilizing as many touch points as possible to engage users across multiple entries. And that will generate for these companies 10% growth year over year, as opposed to companies that have a regular growth of 3% because they don't have connected ecosystems that engage across multiple touch points. So from expanding the content universe, you can grow the audience, you can deepen the engagement, then you get more fans, then you broaden the IP experience, and then you broaden opportunities for revenue. So it's all the cyclical cycle that you want to trigger. One thing I want to know here, because some people might be confusing, or I was at some point confusing, adaptation versus transmedia. And the difference here is really that adaptation is all about, being super faithful and bringing the format of the story to another medium, but with minimum variation. It's really about being super faithful, and it's quite a redundance of the original work because, that's adaptation. It's all about bringing to life the story originally. But Transmedia is more about the extension and the expansion of the understanding of what the original IP is all about, and it's introducing new elements of fiction. So it's really creating a multi-dimension around your IP. And that's what fans are seeking. I think loyalty is really built now by creating all these new entry points. That's the kind of world that fans want to evolve in, and that's why you see the top games investing in building these departments like Blizzard is doing, as well like Riot and so on. I'm going to get into some theory because I'm a scholar geek and I love good papers and people that have spent years studying stuff. So Enry Jenkin is a scholar in media, wrote about 20 books about participatory culture, pop culture, and media. And he has cornered 7 principles behind transmedia storytelling. So I want to lay out these 7 principles because I think these could be interesting ingredients for you to think about in terms of what could be things that we could do tomorrow or even today around your IP. And these 7 principles have been guiding us in the way that we have created our practice at Allison Smith Studio. When we design ARGs, we think about these principles, and some of them have influenced us even more than others. So I'll give you some examples as well. So you can see the breadth of possibilities with Transmedia. Principle number 1, we call it spreadability and drillability. So spreadability, you could say virality, but do not say virality to a marketing agency because they will not want to see that in a brief. So instead say spreadability, being the principle of getting your fans to spread the content, basically sharing. And really the shareability is really designed as an interaction in the story point. So an example from the OG ARG made for music and marketing is the 9 Inch Nail Year Zero promotion. So in 2007, early days, they were dropping USB keys in bathrooms across the venues where they were touring. And people that found a USB key, few selected fans got to find them, and there was a hidden song on it. It was a whole rabbit hole that got people to discover also backstories, but it was about giving that little thing that got people to spread it like a virus, literally. So the virality came from designing a mechanism for fans to be integrally part of the story. Drillability, if you think of drilling down, it's like really about the depth of things. It's about stories that encourage deep investigation. And so the investigative mindset is something that's really core to also the ARG culture. I also think that there's other ways and fresh ways that we can be investigative. It doesn't have to be all about corrupt, like science fiction and alternate worlds that are, like The Matrix. But The Matrix is very big inspiration. Of course, also our name comes from Alice and Alice in Wonderland and Smith, like Agent Smith in The Matrix. So it's all about this convergence of technology and creativity. But in the spirit of one of the biggest IP out there that really is about drillability, it's The Matrix, because it's all about these little Easter eggs and these codes that fans will spend time collecting, discussing, and it's really kind of putting fire in the haystack for people to try to find the end of the cryptic messages. What is the end of this meaning? There's none. It's always speculation and fan theories. Lost, the series, is also a really good example of a TV show that was designed kind of non-linearly and really in the early days of also social media being the second screen of people talking and speculating, building wiki, which we call the encyclopedic impulse of fans wanting to document everything. This is what we call drillability. So thinking about what could be the open endings and the book ending that we leave and the Easter eggs that we let fans really speculate about but intentionally design as part of our strategy. Principle number 2, we got continuity and multiplicity being 2 sides of a coin. Continuity meaning you want to maintain the coherence. Again, the historian. How can you make sure that when you expand the story, it's coherent? There's no inconsistency, because that's what's paying off for the fans. This consistency and the fact that, oh, I got this. I really understood that this would happen, and oh my God, I got this reference from this past thing, and this is the coherence that will bring the big payoff. So here you got how George Lucas designed this holocron, which was kind of the way that they were tracking a lot of the stories of Star Wars, which is a gigantic IP. So how do you make sure that all these entry points are coherent? There was also the holocron that allows for that. And the multiplicity, that's an interesting one because it's about the varying storyline within the same continuous and coherent realm. So for those of you that are fans of cinema, Rashomon is kind of a style where you're going to see a scene or a movie where it's the same scene, but seen from the lens of different characters. And so bringing these different perspectives is another way to be transmediating in your storytelling practice. Here I have a really strange example, but it's the Pride and Prejudice zombie, which is kind of a weird crossover, but it's this alternate world within the IP. So there's always also in the multiplicity the capacity to do interesting spin-offs and bring alternate worlds within the IP that can bring other tones as well. I'm thinking also of the Monsterverse being a really cool multiplicity example, like these crossovers of like Godzilla meeting King Kong and the coherence of it all, but also bringing these different lands, allowing for a multiplicity of formats and TV shows and movies that are now a thing I'm obsessed about. Principle number 3, the immersion and the extractability. So another way to really expand on the story is to get the fans to enter that world physically and mentally. So you can think of, movies and like Avatar trying to be as like detailed and sophisticated in its animation. So you watch the movie and you're feeling it, you're almost smelling it. It's also quite literally getting people to play the story in the real world, like Why So Serious, which is one of the iconic ARG that was done for The Dark Knight. And it was basically fans being recruited by the Joker, receiving real letters, phone calls, and it culminated with a 12-hour hunt to find pieces of cakes. Only a dozen people were actually able to attend that kind of scavenger hunt, but it was broadcasted and about 1.4 million people online were watching. So also thinking about immersion, not just as building an event, but it's how do you create an experience that can be amplified where you have, like in basketball, you got, the front row seats, you got people on the court chilling, and you have the people playing the game. So it's about designing these experiences with layers of designing for different types of users, and people might be just lurkers, but that's fine. They play also an important role in this immersion. Extractability, that's really cool. So that's what we call the memento, which is also one of our signature at Allison Smith, because it is when a fan can actually take a piece of the universe and bring it home. Of course, you think about merchandising and collectibles being already part of the transmedia approach when it's the first thing that you might do with a plush or a t-shirt, but think also about what could be elements as simple as what we did for No Man's Sky, which was bringing to life the Atlas Pass. So we created these cards, like really cheap cards, but we send them out to players that reach a certain level in our ARG. And I swear to God, I often find people that just pull it out of their wallet and they still have that card because it means so much. Because it's a proof that they were highly engaged and they reached that point. So it's status symbol. So the memento, what could be that piece of your story that you can use as a way to reward the community and use it as a badge of honor. Wider principle, of course, world building. It's really designing your IP as a rich tapestry. So there's many entry points from characters and environments and circumstances. League of Legends is a great example. Of course, you've probably seen Arcane, but it wasn't really an IP designed at first to be able to create these animated, series that were fantastic. But they went there because they wanted to find a way to to of course serve the fans. So it was really, Arcane was made for fans, but it touched other people. It got new players to discover League of Legends. And what's interesting as well, and one of the head of Transmedia at Riot mentioned in another talk that I saw, she wants to design these new formats to help the audience grow with the IP. Because at some point, it's not everybody that's going to still play League of Legends forever. Maybe they're going to grow up, but they still want to have a piece of that universe. So thinking also in terms of strategy of who you're targeting and how they're going to evolve and tracking their behavior and thinking what are other formats that could make this story never stop for them. Because it's really about making the story never stop, not just when they're playing, but beyond. The seriality, of course, series, but also a point on this, the cinematic Marvel universe is, of course, big transmedia tapestry, but you also have an elasticity to your seriality. So think about how far you can go before you get your audience tired. So something to think about for Marvel. Subjectivity. Something else is here that we always put at the core of our strategy, and it's really this notion of giving complexity through the multitude of characters and point of view, which can take the shape of bringing to life the characters on Discord, like a chatbot for interacting with a character from your game. Again, for Tender, we had these vampire from the game that people could chat with. So they got pieces of the story that were different, coming back to the other multiplicity that we talked about earlier, and performance. Because there is some sort of role-playing involved in transmedia when done right. I love to say that the right kind of RPG is the one that you just play yourself, but you accept the rules of that world that is designed in front of you. And when it's in the real world, that brings in some really interesting perspective because you just see the world so differently. I should have probably hired an actor to walk in the room and give somebody an envelope and give you the feeling of what it is when you feel like the world around you can turn into a playground. And The Beast is a very famous ARG that was made for AI, the movie by Steven Spielberg. One of the also very first commercial ARG that was made by Microsoft because they bought the rights to the games and never made any games with AI, but they made this ARG. And it all started with cryptic messages on the poster and in the trailer, and people wanted to know, who's Janine Sala? And then it went down a rabbit hole. And so the performance of the fans discovering and spitballing out of this content was the experience. So the performance can take on many shapes. We call it either overt participation, where you're going to ask people to vote, like what this character should do next, or American Idol, text to vote, whatever. So very, transmedia overt participation 101. Organic being more of like making sure that you plant the right seeds of conversation so that the fans are talking about the themes themselves. And obscure, like the one that was done in The Beast, to really kind of send out these flashy codes and get people to catch it. We did an ARG for Funcom a few years ago. It took 6 months for people to catch the code. We hid something in the code of a website, but we knew we planted it there, and we knew like the client was in a rush to launch the campaign. They needed time anyway to finish the game, but it took 6 months, but we were patient. Sometimes you'll just engineer for people to find the code faster, of course. That's when you need to have a shepherd in your community or influencers involved. Okay, so lots of stuff here to think about. The starting point when we build transmedia storytelling strategies with our client is the model that I love to use, which is the 3 Cs. And this could be something that you take in your playbook and think about as different intersections that can bring really interesting ideas for designing your transmedia experience and marketing campaign as something that's really interactive. 3 Cs, so we have the characters, of course, that's the story, that's your world. There's convenience, it's the right content at the right time for the right people, distribution. Community, where people feel a sense of belonging, where they feel rewarded, where they feel seen. So the intersection of character and convenience is really kind of this personal connection with specific elements of the games, more than one-to-one. When you merge convenience and community, that's where you can segment these relationships to different aspects of the world and create activities for them to have to unlock and get rewarded with content. So what can these subgroups do together to unlock the next phase and be rewarded and on board and do some referrals and recruit. So that's kind of the organic word of mouth that will get your fans to work together and grow organically, the fan base. And then when character meets community, that's the relationship that your fans have to your world. And when it gets really interesting is when there's that cooperation, that dynamic of UGC, co-creation. And I would argue that this is, I think, where the most innovation can take place today. It's really where transmedia meets community and where they're gonna have a say or an influence on maybe the next iteration of your story, or simply are just going to be the one creating the content that will generate the word of mouth. So speaking of course, fanfic, so let me get that stats right. I think it's less than 50% of the content read on Harry Potter was written by J.K. Rowling. So half of the content that people read on Harry Potter are made by fans. It's huge. I mean, just Googling on one site, it's more than 1 million different stories written by fans. So of course it's not all of it that's high quality, and I did select the right screenshot so you can see the sexy stuff, but it is still interesting to see where a really quality and valuable IP is the one that gets fans to spitball and adapt and make their own in a way. So how can you think about rewarding that behavior? The valuable product of a media company is no longer just its property and staff to generate content. It's the environment in which fans can create on the story's behalf. Future of Transmedia is in the hands of fans, I would argue. And of course, you know about the benefits of investing in your community and how that brings a lot of value. You can turn your players into advocates. You know, that's the core principle of Minecraft, you know, and I think I saw a stat and I was trying to find a source, but I think it's when you look at Gen Alpha, half of them are creators. They're not just playing, they're actually creating the game. So if you want to think of the future of your IP, you need to think in terms of what will the next generation want to interact with? What will they want to create around your story? Communities are also invaluable sources of feedback. You know about the early access, but when you have that dynamic conversation, you can optimize as you go. And there's no ARG we've ran as planned. There's always a moment when we're like, oh shit, the fans have a better idea than us. Let's optimize, let's spin it all. And they're gonna think it's their idea, that's even better. But we listen. And so it's not just putting out a campaign out in the world, and it's not just looking at the wish list conversion number, but it's looking at the sentiment. Are people enjoying it? And what do they want to see next? Of course, when you have a dedicated community, they're going to be the one doing the work to expend on your story. You know, World of Warcraft being also a great example of that. And the supportive community will be your best marketing tool. They're going to be the one recruiting others, like Stardew Valley is a great example of word of mouth marketing. So let's give them something to talk about. This is really the core principle, and this is what we love to do most at Allison Smith, is really giving things for people to do in what we design. And Sean Stewart, who's the one who designed the Beast, ARG, that I mentioned earlier on AI, the movie, said something very interesting, and he was in a podcast recently, and he said that when he designed the Beast, it's incredible how people were super positive and had so much fun, and the community was so inclusive as long as they had things to do. The second they didn't have any activity, it started to be super negative. Whoop, the trolls started popping. So as long as you give them something to do, you're going to be able to elevate the community culture and bring something very healthy. So transmedia marketing really, I believe, is a community playground. So ARG is a work of art targeting a collection of people. It's not a single player experience. And ARG is built so that you have multiple people experiencing different part of it at the same time and sharing it back and forth. And he was using a really interesting analogy. Well, of course, the school of fish, you know, it's the group. You're not just targeting individuals, but he was also giving this reference to, you know, the Academy of Science and the Darwin era, when all the scientists were, one was going in South Africa, said, I found this weird lizard. The other was like in Iceland and found a bone of a mammoth or whatever. And they all came back and said, look at all these things we found, and then build a theory. This is how an ARG works. They're all gonna find these crumbs, they're gonna come together, and they're gonna feel as collectively rewarded by the content you're gonna give them. So I'm gonna play a short video because I've been speaking a lot and there's nothing better than a case study. So I spoke a little bit about No Man's Sky. So I'm gonna let you watch our Waking Titan case study, and then I'll deep dive a little bit more after in dissecting the tactics that we used to bring this to life. Can we get sound, my friend? Thank you. Now you see all my mess. You know, that was done a few years ago, but I still love to bring this example because also on the spirit of what's the mindset, the organizational mindset that will make this possible is also trust. And in the process, whenever we work with clients, there's lots of workshop involved. They will give us the room to innovate and to bring our own flavor to the lore. Of course, we need to be onboarded in the world, but it's when we get that freedom to expand together that things become magical. And that's what happened with Hello Games. They gave us the freedom to create new angles around the lore, and made this campaign a success. So, action?
No Man's Sky is an action-adventure survival video game. Set in an infinite generated galaxy with 18 quintillion planets to explore. It sold more than 750,000 copies at launch, making it a worldwide top seller. Unfortunately, the game also earned one of the worst ever user ratings and was even the object of an open investigation for false advertising. Many players felt the products didn't deliver what the advertising promised, and as a result, the brand was tarnished. So how do you create a successful marketing campaign in the midst of all this backlash? You have to go beyond just promoting the game. To honor the complexity of the game, we created Waking Titan, an ongoing alternative reality game. To launch it, we sent cassette tapes to members of the Reddit gaming community, which featured hidden messages that could only be deciphered using spectrography. All tapes were encrypted with a single word: Portal. At the same time, we aired mysterious radio ads in 16 countries worldwide. Each ad advertised a fake company selling a core concept from the No Man's Sky universe. All the fake companies had LinkedIn profiles, emails, phone numbers, and a website, each containing Easter eggs and puzzles that gamers had to solve to become part of the citizen science division. The campaign culminated with 4 radio ads which aired during the popular Howard Stern show, which, when decrypted and combined together, revealed that No Man's Sky had created the ARG just to thank its community for standing by them until the long-awaited update was released. And best of all, the total cost of the campaign was covered in the first 24 hours of sales of the new patch update.
Not too bad. At the core of it, you know what's a game loop and you know what's an engagement loop, but let's think about it in terms of marketing terms and what you can do to create that inciting incident. What's going to be the trigger that will get people falling down the rabbit hole? What's the action? What's the behavior you want people to take? Is it a quest, mission, puzzle, clues, collaboration? What's that behavior you want to reinforce? Then what's the reward you can give them to thank them? So of course they're going to need some XP, they're going to need some brag, and maybe it's more like the intrinsic motivation of being, shouted out, you're the best, you did that first. Maybe it's more giving them in-game rewards. But then once they're rewarded, then they want to invest more. So what's the next piece of narrative that you can give them so they keep coming back, and then you keep on that loop forever? Or maybe not, depending on your budget. So the kind of 6th element of the infrastructure we usually put in place is the mission hub, missions and puzzles, the live events, community channels, the game integration, and the mementos. So to wrap things up on all the different things I spoke a little bit about earlier, but a core element of the way we think ARGs are more modern and more inclusive is by creating a hub where people can always go to know where the campaign is at. So you don't feel like you're late at the party and there's no more snacks or drinks and you're just like, fuck, party's almost over. No, there's always something to do. There's always a way for other fans to keep you up to speed, to know as the progress. So we always design a hub. More recently, we did this project for Red Bull and we had the hub in the extension on Twitch. So they could know what was the point progression, what was the next mission they could do. They had quizzes to complete to earn points. So really making this onboarding experience very inclusive. Communication channels, think also of what are the channels that you want to launch or reinvent or re-inject with energy. Is it your Discord? Is it Instagram or TikTok? And so designing ways to integrate these touch points will make them reach critical mass. The missions and puzzle here, there's multiple ways to do that, and that's one way to do ARGs. The thing I want you to note here is that we never design things that are PvP in our ARGs. It's always about collective coming together. Of course, maybe somebody's going to find the answer first, but what we want to do is make sure that people feel collectively rewarded, and that's where the really good spirit comes from. The live event component, of course, you cannot always create a huge event with 30 actors like we did at GDC a few years ago for Paradox, but you can also do the live drops or the dead drops, which is geocaching, sending little clues, sending specific briefing to streamers. So more recently, we did an ARG with Nacon for test drive, and we sent specific briefing documents. They had to solve the mystery of cars that had gone missing, and we hired an actress that was also part of their universe to brief them. So the lore in-game integration, if you're able to connect the reward with something in-game, they're gonna go ballistic. What we did for, again, Nacon for Test Drive is that as they were completing the missions, we revealed a 3D car in the hub that was coming out in the premium pack of the game. So the people that got to participate got to see that first. So kind of leaking that exclusive content is something key. Or even translating engagement in XP outside of your game. Like we did the blood points for Bloodlines, where people, as they completed the ARG, they won these points, and then they could buy some merch, or they could get in-game rewards. So maybe a bit more technical integration here necessary, but something that is highly, highly sought after by the community, but also just the content, releasing trailers, like, oh, the fans work together and boom, we unlock the trailer. You're creating a tailgate party like there's no tomorrow, and you're gonna get so much earned media, and that's really what we're going after. Speaking of mementos as well, is very powerful component. Again, the badge of honor that I mentioned. So thinking about these small things that you can give out. And also just the press, creator, and fan content, which is always something that's a huge ROI on ARGs and Transmedia, is the word of mouth and the people speaking about the ARG. And we always get somebody who will do a Google Doc with like 37 pages in the case of Red Bull. You wouldn't think like a Red Bull fan would actually like spend that time to write up 37-page essay on the ARG that we ran for them, very small one. But yeah, there it was. And another thing that we always pride ourselves to do, and that's really a core of why we do that, is we want to create the next generation of your influencers. So in No Man's Sky, we generated, I think, about 30 influencers came out of it because they were documenting, creating YouTube videos, and they now today still influencers and creators. So you're gonna elevate also the nano influencers in your community to become your next ambassador in a broader sense. So that's already my closing note. So just thoughts for the future. We touched a little bit upon it because of course community is the unsung hero of your IP value. Will your future IP be fan co-created? I'm opening the question and the thoughts, so you can think about that. What could that mean for your next generation of fans? And thinking also with the rise of AI, which I know is very polarizing in the industry, but from a content creation perspective, imagine if you're supercharging your fans with tools to create their own spin-off. Where could that live? What could that mean? Are you open to that? Question, but it will be out there, so let's think about it and have a point of view, because it will potentially bring a lot of value and resonance. So that's all I had to do today with you, is sharing as much as I could on Transmedia. I'm open to questions. I know we're a little bit short on time because there was delays, but great. That's all, folks. Thank you so much for your attention.